Welcome to Stories from the Front. Take a second to like, subscribe, and activate notifications. The Siegfried line still rises in my dreams, as imposing as on the first day. Henry Taylor is my name, and serving in the Big Red One, the 1st U.S. Infantry Division taught me that some barriers remain even after they have been overcome. The walls of those German bunkers became the pages on which I wrote my war story. It was February 1945, and the icy air cut our faces like razors as we prepared for what would be one of the most decisive battles of our lives. Our unit had been ordered to penetrate the German defenses near Aachen. The Siegfried Line, or West Wall as the Germans called it, was not just a line of defense, it was a masterpiece of military engineering, a monster of concrete and steel that stretched for hundreds of kilometers. Our preparation began weeks before the main attack. I remember spending hours studying maps and intelligence reports with my platoon. Sergeant Miller, a combat veteran who had fought in Sicily, always reminded us, "Boys, this won't be like Normandy. Here, every meter conquered will be paid for with American blood." The German bunkers were impressive feats of engineering. Concrete walls, over 2 meters thick, strategically placed artillery positions, and what worried us most, the minefields. Intelligence estimated that there were thousands of landmines scattered around the area we would need to cross. The night before the attack, we gathered in an old abandoned farmhouse. Captain Henderson distributed the last instructions. His normally serene face carried a gravity that I will never forget. "Tomorrow," he said, "we begin the last major offensive on German soil. Each of you has been trained for this moment." Dawn brought with it the deafening sound of Allied artillery. Hundreds of cannons were firing simultaneously, trying to weaken the German positions. The ground shook beneath our feet, and the horizon turned into an inferno of explosions and smoke. It was our artillery preparation, but we knew that the German bunkers would resist. We advanced in scattered formation, each soldier carrying not only his equipment, but the weight of historical responsibility. Our mission was clear: to break through the defense line and open the way for the main forces. The combat engineers accompanied us, checking every meter of the terrain for mines and traps. The first contact with the enemy was through mortar fire. The Germans had calculated the distances perfectly, and their grenades began to fall with frightening precision. I saw young soldiers, some still in their teens, showing courage that defied comprehension. Private O'Brien, a boy from Minnesota who had barely turned 19, continued to advance even after seeing his best friend hit. The next few hours turned into a nightmare of close combat. Each bunker was a fortress that had to be conquered individually. We used flamethrowers and explosives to clear enemy positions, but the Germans fought with the determination of someone defending their own soil. It was during one of these assaults that I witnessed something that would change my perspective on the war. A young German officer, after surrendering, showed me a photo of his family in Stuttgart. At that moment, I realized that beyond fortifications and steel, there were human beings on both sides of the conflict. The battle continued for days. We lost good men, including Sergeant Miller, who was shot while leading an assault on a machine gun nest. His last order was simple: keep moving, don't let our sacrifice be in vain. As we penetrated deeper into the defensive line, we found evidence of the deterioration of the German army. Some bunkers were defended by teenagers from the Hitler Youth, others by elderly veterans. Even so, their resistance was fierce, fueled by years of propaganda and the desperation to defend their homeland. The advance was meticulous and costly. Each bunker conquered represented hours of planning, coordination between infantry, tanks, and artillery. Our determination was fueled by the knowledge that each step brought us closer to the end of the war, to the possibility of returning home. Those days on the Siegfried line shaped not only the course of the war, but also the lives of everyone who took part in that battle. We learned about courage, sacrifice, and the terrible reality of modern combat. Most importantly, we learned that even the most formidable defenses can be overcome when ordinary men unite for a cause greater than themselves. The first rays of sunshine that day revealed the true scale of our challenge. Our unit had managed to establish a foothold during the night, but the price was high. We lost 3 good men just to secure that small piece of land, and we knew the worst was yet to come. What impressed me most about the Siegfried line was not just its length or the thickness of its bunkers, but the precision with which each defensive element had been planned. The Germans had turned natural geography into a weapon. Every hill concealed a firing position, every depression in the terrain could hide a deadly trap. "Taylor, we need to check that ridge," said Lieutenant Parker, pointing to a small hill in front of us. He was a young officer, but already showed the wisdom of a veteran. With a small reconnaissance group, we began to move cautiously across the uneven terrain. It was during this mission that I witnessed one of the most surreal scenes of the war. We came across a bunker partially destroyed by our artillery, and inside it a German radio was still playing Wagner's classical music. The contrast between the beauty of the music and the surrounding destruction was disconcerting. Our progress was meticulous. The combat engineers, the real heroes of that operation, worked tirelessly to detect and disarm the mines. Corporal Martinez, an explosives expert, saved countless lives with his almost supernatural ability to identify booby traps. "Every inch of this terrain has been prepared to kill us," Martinez used to say as he worked. The Germans left nothing to chance. He was right. Even the open fields that seemed safe were sown with anti-personnel mines and ingenious traps. German resistance varied from sector to sector. At some points we encountered well-equipped and determined Wehrmacht units. In others we came across soldiers from the Volkssturm, the popular militia formed in the last days of the Reich, poorly equipped, but equally determined to defend their country. One of the most impressive discoveries was a complex system of tunnels connecting the main bunkers. The Germans had created a veritable underground city with ammunition depots, infirmaries, and rest areas. It was a testament to German military ingenuity even in the final stages of the war. Sergeant Wilson, our communications specialist, was in constant contact with the command, updating our position and requesting support when necessary. His radio was our lifeline to the rest of the world, and he protected it as if it were his own child. "The Germans are using coded frequencies," he explained to me during a break in the fighting. "We've managed to intercept some messages, but they change the codes constantly." This information war was just as important as the physical fighting. As we advanced, we found evidence of the growing desperation among the German defenders. Unsent letters, personal diaries, and family photographs were discovered in captured bunkers. They were painful reminders that our enemies were human too, with their own stories and dreams interrupted by the war. The weather was our constant enemy. The penetrating cold of that European winter made every move a challenge. Our gloves froze to the triggers of our guns, and the slippery terrain turned every step into a calculated risk. One of the most tense moments came when we discovered a particularly well-fortified bunker that served as a German command post. Captain Henderson gathered the company together to plan the assault. "We need this point," he explained, "but I'm not going to sacrifice any of you unnecessarily." The operation was preceded by an intense artillery bombardment. The 155mm shells hit the enemy positions with devastating accuracy, but even so, we knew we would encounter resistance inside the bunker. The Germans were masters of surviving heavy bombardment. The assault on the bunker revealed a brutal truth about modern warfare. Even with all our superiority in equipment and numbers, human determination was still the deciding factor. Every room, every corridor had to be conquered meter by meter, often in hand-to-hand combat in the dark. Dawn brought us a new perspective on the brutality of the Siegfried line. After days of intense fighting, our unit had managed to establish a firmer foothold, but the Germans still held control of several strategic points. The constant sound of artillery had become our daily soundtrack, a relentless reminder of the reality we faced. During a lull in the fighting, Lieutenant Parker gathered our section together to discuss the next phase of the operation. The intelligence maps indicated a series of interconnected bunkers that we needed to neutralize. "It's a fortress within another fortress," he explained, pointing to the markings on the map. The German defense system was even more sophisticated than we initially thought. We discovered that many of the bunkers had elaborate ventilation systems and reserves of supplies that allowed their garrisons to hold out for weeks. The German engineers had thought of every detail. "We need a new approach," suggested Corporal Martinez, our demolitions expert. He proposed a daring plan to use controlled explosive charges to create blind spots in the enemy's defenses. It was risky, but at that moment all options were risky. The plan was put into practice the next morning. Our artillery began a diversionary bombardment, while small teams infiltrated through gaps in the defensive system. Sergeant Wilson coordinated communications, keeping all the units synchronized. Precision was crucial. A mistake in timing could be fatal. It was during this operation that I witnessed one of the most surprising moments of the war. In one of the captured bunkers, we found a young, wounded German officer who spoke perfect English. He had studied at Harvard before the war. His presence, there was a disturbing reminder of how the conflict had distorted normal lives. The advance continued slowly but steadily. Each bunker conquered revealed new information about the German defense system. Captured documents showed detailed blueprints, communication codes, and most importantly, signs that enemy morale was deteriorating. Captain Henderson kept a meticulous diary of our operations. "We need to document this," he would say. "Future generations need to understand what happened here." His detailed notes included not only tactical movements, but also observations on the human cost of the conflict. One particularly significant discovery was an underground communication center. The Germans had built an operations room complete with state-of-the-art radio equipment and detailed maps of the entire region. Sergeant Wilson spent hours studying the captured equipment, looking for information that could give us an advantage. The combat conditions were brutal. The uneven terrain, soaked by the constant rain, turned every movement into a fight against nature. Our boots sank into the mud, and the weight of the equipment seemed to double every hour. Even so, we kept going. The German tunnel system was a deadly labyrinth. We used flashlights and fluorescent markers to avoid getting lost, always on the lookout for traps and hidden defensive positions. Corporal O'Brien developed a system of silent signals that allowed us to communicate without alerting the enemy. As we penetrated deeper into the defensive complex, we found evidence of the Germans' growing desperation. Increasingly scarce rations, rationed ammunition, and personal diaries that revealed their awareness of imminent defeat. Even so, their resistance remained fierce. One of the most tense moments came when we discovered a huge ammunition dump. The danger lay not only in the explosives stored, but in the possibility that it was booby-trapped. Martinez worked for hours to ensure that the area was secure, showing impressive calm under extreme pressure. The war had taught us valuable lessons about human nature. I saw young soldiers mature in a matter of days, transformed by the weight of responsibility and the reality of combat. Private Peterson, who had arrived as a replacement just 2 weeks earlier, was already showing the experience of a veteran. The nights were especially challenging. The Germans often carried out counterattacks in the dark, trying to recover lost positions. We maintained constant vigilance, taking turns on guard duty while trying to rest in the bowels of captured bunkers. The advance through the Siegfried line was transforming us. We were no longer just soldiers following orders. We were witnesses to a historic moment, active participants in the dismantling of the Reich's last great defense. Every bunker conquered, every position secured brought us closer to the end of the war, although the price in lives and sacrifices remained high. The days melted away as we continued our offensive across the Siegfried line. The captured maps revealed an even more complex network of defenses than we had imagined. Each bunker conquered showed us the perverse genius of German military engineering, but also its growing weaknesses. "Taylor, I need you and your team for a special mission," said Captain Henderson one particularly cold morning. We had identified a weak point in the enemy defense system, a sector guarded mainly by Volkssturm units, but which would give access to a crucial strategic position. The plan was audacious. Our team, along with elements of B Company, was to infiltrate during the night using the cover of a forecast storm. Martinez would be responsible for identifying and neutralizing the mines, while Wilson would maintain our communication with command via a new set of codes. During the preparations, I found a diary in one of the recently captured bunkers. It belonged to a German officer who described in distressing detail how the situation was deteriorating day by day. The latest entries revealed a shortage of supplies and growing hopelessness among the troops. Lieutenant Parker gathered our team together for the last details of the mission. "Remember," he said, "our goal is not just to break through the defenses, but to establish a bridgehead to the main forces. His words carried the weight of responsibility that we all felt. The infiltration began at midnight. The freezing rain and strong wind were both our curse and our blessing. They hindered our movement, but also masked our sounds. Martinez led the way, his silent metal detector guiding us through the minefield. We encountered the first serious resistance near a complex of secondary bunkers. A group of young German soldiers, none of whom looked older than 17, defended their position with a determination born of desperation. The fighting that followed was brief but intense. Wilson kept in constant contact with command, whispering coordinates and updates over the radio. Our artillery was ready to offer support, but we tried to keep our presence discreet for as long as possible. Every shot not fired was a greater chance of success. The defensive complex turned out to be even more elaborate on the inside. Tunnels connected different positions, some so narrow that we had to crawl. The air was heavy with the smell of mold and gunpowder. Around every corner we expected to encounter resistance. It was while exploring these tunnels that we made a significant discovery. A cache of documents revealed detailed plans of the German defenses in adjacent sectors. Captain Henderson immediately recognized the strategic value of this information. Dawn brought with it the distant sound of engines, our tanks approaching as planned. Timing was crucial. We needed to hold our position and ensure that the armored forces found a safe path through the minefield. Corporal O'Brien organized our perimeter defense while the engineers worked frantically to create a safe passage. We saw signs of counterattacks, forming movement of enemy troops in the distant hills. Time was against us. Our position soon became a focal point of the battle. The Germans, realizing the strategic importance of a site, launched a series of coordinated attacks. We defended every meter gained with iron determination, knowing that every minute gained was vital to the success of a larger operation. Martinez continued his meticulous work with the explosives, now disarming traps left by the retreating Germans. "They're clever," he commented. "Each device is unique, designed to fool even the experts." Dawn found us exhausted but victorious. We had established the necessary bridgehead, and the first armored units were beginning to cross the corridor we had opened. The cost had been high, but each sacrifice brought us closer to the end of the war. Captain Henderson gathered our team for a brief moment of rest. As we shared rations and water, he stressed the importance of what we had achieved. "You didn't just break a line of defense," he said, "you helped break the backbone of German resistance in this sector." Watching the tanks pass our position, I felt a mixture of pride and melancholy. Each advance meant one less day at war closer to home, but it also carried the weight of the lives lost along the way. The Siegfried line was being won not just by steel and explosives, but by the unwavering determination of ordinary men facing extraordinary circumstances. The days on the Siegfried line began to merge into an endless sequence of fighting and gradual advances. Our unit had established a strong position after the last successful operation, but the command was already planning the next move. War didn't allow for long pauses for contemplation. "Taylor, I need you to lead a reconnaissance team," said Captain Henderson, pointing to an unexplored sector on our maps. "There are rumors of a German command center in that area. We need to confirm it before mobilizing greater resources." Sergeant Wilson and Corporal Martinez immediately volunteered for the mission. Our combined experience had made us an efficient team. Martinez knew every type of German trap, and Wilson could operate the radio even under heavy fire. During the preparations, we found a group of German prisoners being escorted to the rear. One of them, a Wehrmacht officer, offered information about the sector we planned to reconnoiter. "There are more than just bunkers there," he said in perfect English. "You will find something that will change your understanding of this war." His enigmatic words made us uneasy. Lieutenant Parker suggested redoubling caution, expanding our team to include 2 additional demolition experts. "If we encounter heavy resistance, we'll need options," he explained. The infiltration began before dawn. The terrain was different in this sector, fewer obvious minefields, more subtle traps. Martinez identified several camouflaged alarm devices, technology we hadn't encountered before. The Germans were clearly protecting something important. Wilson was in constant communication with command, using a new set of codes developed after our latest discovery of enemy documents. Silence was our main defense, every move calculated to avoid detection. We discovered the first anomaly after 2 hours advance. An apparently standard bunker concealed an entrance to an underground complex much more elaborate than the previous ones. The walls were reinforced with extra steel, and the corridors followed a different pattern. "This is no ordinary bunker," whispered Martinez, examining the construction specifications. "It looks more like a research center." His observations soon proved correct. We found hastily abandoned laboratories, partially burnt documents, and sophisticated equipment. Corporal O'Brien, a documentation specialist, began photographing everything we found. Each room revealed more evidence that this place was much more than just a defensive position. The Germans had conducted experiments here, although the exact nature of them remained a mystery. Our exploration was interrupted by sounds of movement above. Wilson quickly alerted command to our situation. We were potentially trapped in an unknown complex with enemy forces closing in. Lieutenant Parker organized our defense in layers. Every corridor became a defensive position, every corner a possible escape route. Years of combat had taught us how to turn any terrain into a makeshift fortress. The first contact with the enemy came from an unexpected direction. A group of German soldiers emerged from a tunnel that didn't appear on any of our maps. The ensuing combat was confusing and claustrophobic, fought in narrow corridors and dark rooms. Martinez proved his worth once again, identifying and disarming traps left by the retreating Germans. They wanted to destroy this place, he observed, showing an elaborate demolition system he had neutralized. Something shouldn't be found here. The next few hours were dedicated to holding our position while specialized teams were sent to examine our discovery. Captain Henderson arrived in person to assess the situation. His expression on seeing the labs revealed that our suspicions were correct. We had found something significant. Wilson intercepted German transmissions, indicating panic among his commanders when they learned that the complex had been discovered. "They're mobilizing everything they can," he reported. "This place is too important for them." Our reconnaissance mission had turned into something much bigger. We were now responsible for protecting a discovery that could have implications beyond the war itself. The weight of this responsibility was palpable on every face in our unit. Our discovery in the Siegfried Line underground complex changed the course of operations in that sector. The command sent military intelligence experts to examine the laboratories, while our unit maintained a defensive perimeter against inevitable German counterattacks. "This is bigger than we imagined," said Captain Henderson after a meeting with senior officers. The documents recovered revealed advanced research in various fields, including the development of experimental weapons. The Germans' desperation in trying to destroy the site made even more sense now. Wilson kept intercepting increasingly frantic German messages. "They're mobilizing elite SS units," he informed me during a pause. "The German High Command is panicking about what we may have found here." Martinez and his team of engineers were working tirelessly to secure the complex. Each new room explored had to be thoroughly checked for booby traps and explosives. "The Germans are methodical," he commented. "Every inch of this place can hide a deadly surprise." Lieutenant Parker organized our defense in concentric layers. The first German counterattack came at dusk, a coordinated attempt to retake the complex. The battle that followed was one of the most intense I've ever experienced. The Germans fought with the desperation of someone who knows they are protecting vital secrets. During the fighting, I witnessed acts of extraordinary courage. Private O'Brien, even though wounded, held his ground against successive waves of attackers. Sergeant Wilson continued to operate his radio under heavy fire, coordinating our artillery support with deadly precision. The arrival of American reinforcements finally solidified our position. Tanks from the 3rd Armored Division established an outer perimeter, while intelligence specialists began processing the massive amount of information found in the compound. In the midst of all this chaos, I found a moment to reflect on our journey across the Siegfried Line. Every bunker conquered, every position taken had been a step towards this crucial moment. The cost in lives and sacrifices had been immense, but it was proving significant. The following days brought surprising revelations. The complex wasn't just a research center, it was part of a larger network of secret facilities spread across Germany. Our discovery had inadvertently exposed an unknown facet of a Nazi war effort. Captain Henderson gathered our unit for a special briefing. "What you found here," he said, "could hasten the end of this war. Every document, every piece of equipment gives us more strategic advantage." Martinez discovered something particularly interesting in one of the deeper lab's plans for even more advanced defense systems that never got built. If they had time to implement this, he commented, the Siegfried line would be practically impenetrable. Wilson, always on the lookout for enemy communications, noticed a significant change in German messaging patterns. "They are in complete disarray," he reported. "Our discovery seems to have destabilized the entire chain of command in this sector." The impact of our operation extended far beyond that underground complex. The information recovered helped other Allied units to identify and neutralize weak points in the German defenses. The Siegfried line, that formidable barrier that had seemed insurmountable weeks before, was beginning to crumble. As I watched new groups of German prisoners being escorted to the rear, I noticed a change in their expressions. It was no longer the fanatical determination we had initially encountered. It was resignation, the awareness that their defeat was inevitable. Lieutenant Parker, ever the pragmatist, constantly reminded us that the war wasn't over yet. "Every victory brings us closer to the end," he would say, "but it also makes the enemy more desperate." His words proved prophetic in the fighting we would still face. Those days on the Siegfried line taught me a lot about the nature of war and humanity. I saw young soldiers turn into hardened veterans. I saw enemies momentarily become allies in the preservation of life. And I witnessed how human determination can overcome even the most formidable defenses. Today, decades later, I still dream of those concrete bunkers, the dark tunnels, and the sacrifices of good men. The Siegfried line wasn't just a battle, it was a test of human will, courage, and endurance. Every meter conquered carried the price of American blood, but also the weight of the history we helped shape. When we finally left that sector, we carried with us not only the physical and emotional scars of battle, but also the awareness that we had participated in something greater than ourselves. The war would continue for a few more months, but there in that underground complex on the Siegfried line, we had helped seal the fate of the Third Reich.